to Playbook for Performance, the official podcast of Shauna Corden, the Joan of Arc for corporate healing and performance. Join the quest to make work fun again by preparing leadership for engaging workplaces. And now, your host.
Hello and welcome, friends. I'm Shauna Corden, and I'm glad to have you here on the Playbook for Performance podcast. Our mission is to make work fun again by building better leaders. This month's theme is all about engagement. If you have a specific question on engagement, email us and we can add it to our social media. Drop a note to podcast@shaunacorden.com. Now, last week, we talked about the additional benefits of the coach approach, including productive conversations. Today, we're talking about engagement and why engagement is so important. So what is engagement? Gallup defines engagement as productivity, profitability, and retention. And there are some fantastic stats out there that I cover in my book that talk about how important engagement is in terms of financial results for companies. Companies with strong engagement outperform their peers by 147% per share. So it's worth paying attention to. So let's break it down a little bit. When we talk about productivity, we're talking about tools, behaviors, and habits for getting things done. How many widgets are we producing? What's the quality of our intellectual property? How competitive are we in terms of solving customer needs in the marketplace? When we talk about profitability, obviously we're talking about, are we making a profit? Do we have an efficient process flow? Are we in the right market? Can we create enough revenue versus our costs? And then finally, retention. Retention is keeping your talent. When we talk about that in the terms of not retaining an employee, we're talking about the cost of recruiting people, interviewing people, hiring, training, onboarding, and holding on to them for longer than at least a year, and ideally many more years than that. So how does Gallup measure these three factors of productivity, profitability, and retention? They have a tool called the Q12, and it's an amazing tool for most organizations across the US. It is essentially the same thing as something in my old company we called the Voice of the Workforce survey, measuring how pleased employees are to be working there. The Q12 is comprised of 12 questions that are organized into 4 areas. What do I give? What do I get? Can I grow? And do I belong? All of these factors regarding engagement can be heavily influenced by coaching. Now, I'm in the business of coaching because I want to coach leaders leading people, and I want those people to be engaged, growing, thriving. And my shortcut for that terminology is making work fun again. I want people to have a good time at work. It's the majority of the time we spend. It's how we provide for our families. It's a big part of our purpose, and I'm going to get into more of that in just a moment. Engagement is extremely important. In fact, I think it's the most important thing. Yet the research shows that greater than 66% of employees pre-COVID are not engaged at work. So what does that mean? It means they're showing up, punching in, and coasting at some level, and then punching out. So they're collecting a paycheck without really having skin in the game, and it's probably satisfactory C-level work versus an A. Now, interestingly enough, Dan Pink did a lot of research in this area and showed that in his book, Drive. And a study that was replicated in many geographies around the world showed that once employees were satisfactorily paid, meaning it was no longer an issue for them, they weren't complaining about it, pay was no longer the driving factor for them at work. That's not what kept them motivated. What kept them motivated were 3 other factors, which I think are very related to the Gallup measures. It was purpose, why we do what we do, mastery, can I get better at this thing I call my vocation, my calling, my career, and autonomy. Can I determine how I do what I do, or am I being force-fed a process that doesn't allow for creativity, innovation, etc.? And coaching also affects all of these factors. I am in the business of what I do because I think our engagement is that very thing that makes us pay attention and give our intention to time and effort. It's the thing that pulls us to work smarter, learn more, take risks, and grow and endure discomfort that growth and challenge and hard goals, like I talked about last week, bring. So how does coaching work with these things? When I'm called into an organization and I'm there to help them with their engagement, this is where I start. I look at how employees are answering these kinds of questions. Do they have the proper tools and training to do the work they're being asked to do? What are they allowed to give? Can they submit ideas and innovation? Are their opinions listened to? But the factors that I think are the most important in these times are, can I grow? Do I belong? Because all of us feel like we're in a slump or we're stagnant or we're in a holding pattern with COVID. And with do I belong, that whole idea of COVID is relationships are more important than ever. And that's why we're seeing a huge part of the workforce in the Great Resignation. People feel like their work doesn't have meaning, it's not important, and they'd rather be at home, helping homeschool their kids, caring for elder parents, or just jumping off that hamster wheel of the rat race so they can reinvest in themselves, restore their health, restore their sanity, and get to a place where they do feel belonging. When I'm consulting with an organization about their engagement, I start asking questions. I do that feed forward exercise. What can the organization do to improve your relationship with your leaders? What about the processes in the organization? And just in case you don't think you're analytical enough to look at this, spend a few hours in the urgent care, immediate care, or emergency room in your local healthcare facility. You'll get creative really quickly. You'll find the bureaucracy of insurance checking coverage really gets in the way of providing healthcare. The processes don't make sense because they're not driven by the customer, they're driven by the pay system. As a coach, I want to look at the leaders and how they create productivity within their teams. What are the routines and habits? What are the behaviors that they're exhibiting within those routines or habits? And what tools do they rely on to communicate? When it comes to retention, I want to look at how well they're engaging new employees from day one. Are the new employees showing up to work on day one without a computer, without a cubicle, without an assignment, without a mentor? If so, how welcoming is that kind of message? What does that send? Do they have a safe place to go and ask questions that they may not feel so comfortable asking their manager? Is it a coach? Is it a mentor? I'm not too particular on that. I think coaching is super effective, but it is really nice to have someone on the inside that says, yeah, the poster says we do it this way, but here's how we really do it. When it comes to profitability, I'm going to look for those process flows and what's the process engineering. Again, what do the posters on the wall say versus what we actually do, or are we talking out of both sides of our mouth? So I hope this information has given you several different flavors regarding the theme of engagement. I really encourage you to go out, Google Gallup's Q12, look at those questions in detail, answer them for yourself, for your organization. Do you feel like you can give? Do you have the right setup? Can you grow? Do you belong? Do you have a best friend at work? All those things are super important. I would also really encourage you to listen to Dan Pink's TED Talk on Drive. My favorite version is the RSA Animate version. It's very fun to look at. And personally, I'm super excited. Dan Pink has a new book coming out. I'm a huge fan. But let's hear your questions about engagement. Let's hear from you in terms of what pulls you in to work smarter. What excites you enough to want to learn more? What is it about the environment that says, yeah, I'm willing to be uncomfortable a bit and take a risk so I can really grow? What is it that makes you pay attention and apply intention? Now, if you'd like to learn more about how coaching improves engagement, or you want to schedule a full 2-day coaching skills workshop for your team to engage their employees, email me, shauna@shaunacorden.com. Now, that brings us to our tool of the week. I really do want you to check out Dan Pink's RSA Animate Drive TED Talk. What does it inspire in you? What actions do you want to take after hearing that talk? Each week in the podcast, I like to highlight a leader doing it well, something in the news, or something from a listener. Maybe one that had a wobble. But this week, I really want to carry on a theme from Jen Lerner's recent blog, regarding a slump and how to jumpstart out of one. As a coach, my job is empathy. I don't want you to be too hard on yourself if you're not feeling that normal pump of energy that the temporal landmark of New Year's might normally bring. A lot of us are suffering from burnout and general fatigue from fighting a pandemic for 2 years. So I suggest an alternative. I want you to consider what brings you energy and see if you can inject just a bit more of that into your daily routine. I teach a lesson called 10 Daily Habits, and it's a great lunch and learn webinar to practice self-care. What are the 10 things that you could do daily that feed you? You may not necessarily enjoy them, but you enjoy the benefits of doing them, like flossing your teeth for cavity-free dental checkups or taking your vitamins to ward off a cold. What are 10 things that you can do that will give you a bit more energy since you don't feel like necessarily signing up for a whole list of new goals during the pandemic? So that's all for this week. If you'd like this podcast, please subscribe, give us a rating, tell your friends, engage with us on social media. If you'd like to hear more about a topic that would make your work fun by improving the leaders in your organization, please drop us a line at podcast@shawnacorden.com. Until next week, take good care.
Thank you for listening to Playbook for Performance. To learn more about Shauna Corden, her consulting programs and tools, please visit her website at shawnacorden.com and follow us on social media at Shauna Corden.